Now I can handle Jim getting gutted, or Mary getting slashed across the neck. But
I was debating a little bit which one I was going to do first. I want to talk about The Odyssey, but then a lot of people have been saying, hey, talk about From. So let's do From first. Well, we'll talk about Season 4 From on MGM+, and then we'll do The Odyssey. I'm going to go ahead to the movie theaters tomorrow and watch the new Spider-Man movie. I can't say I'm really, excited about Spider-Man or anything Marvel-related, really. I haven't been for a long time, but generally speaking, I enjoy the Spider-Man movies. They're typically pretty fun, so hopefully that's fun. We'll see. From Season 4. Okay, so probably if you're watching this video, you know what this series is, but I will talk about it a little bit anyways. It is from a number of people who worked on the show Lost, which was a hugely popular show back in the 2000s. And From has a lot of similarities. I call it a Lost-like. It's sort of like how Dark Souls started a genre of Souls-likes. Lost started a genre of Lost-likes, although there aren't nearly as many of them as there are Souls-likes, which is probably for the best. This is your classic mystery box show, and From sort of falls into a lot of the same traps as Lost and other shows like it. But also, I still really like the show, so it's unlike Walking Dead. I still think there's chance for redemption here. On the other hand, Season 4 was a real bummer. I really started off strong, and it ended, and Season 3 ended on a really good cliffhanger with lots of juicy, fan theory stuff to dig our teeth into. And Season 4 just sort of dropped the ball on a lot of things. Some of the things wrong with Season 4 have been things wrong with this show pretty much its entire run. Every season is 10 episodes long, but I swear to God, there are not 10 episodes worth of actual content in any of these seasons, especially from 2 onwards. And I think the problem got worse in Season 3 and then worse again in Season 4. So just too much filler, and a lot of the episodes sort of blur together. I was watching Widow's Bay at the same time I was watching From, and it was so interesting to see these two different takes on horror. Obviously, Widow's Bay is also a comedy, so there's that going for it. From is not funny at all. It like House of the Dragon, From barely understands the meaning of comic relief, which is unfortunate because actually I think one of the things that made Widow's Bay work so well is that it's you can get more scared if there are moments of levity and humor, because you start to care about the characters more, you like them more, and so you get more afraid for them when scary things happen. And that's similar to this. I've said the same thing about House of the Dragon compared to Game of Thrones. We care a lot more about the characters in Game of Thrones because there's a lot more moments of characters being funny and being very human, and so we care about them more. And so when things go bad, we worry for them. Whereas in House of the Dragon, everyone is so just sort of unpleasant and unlikable, and there's really nothing to laugh about. You just, at a certain point, you just get kind of beyond caring what happens to any of these awful people. And From is kind of, unfortunately, like that. I do have a few characters like Victor and Jade and Ethan and Julie, to some extent. She's gotten better, although I'll get to her in a minute here. Fatima, and Donna, I like Donna. So there are a number of characters that I like. And then there's a lot of characters who I dislike, especially a lot of the extras who are always changing and shifting around and generally tend to be stupid and unpleasant and just wastes of space. And they always give them way too much space to waste. So there's a number of scenes with one of the side characters, Roger, who's killed by these big doll monsters, and then Patty, I think is her name, who then gets a bunch of scenes where she's always just freaking out, and it's who is this Patty? Why didn't we have a character we cared about get killed and then have a character we care about freaking out? At least then we would be drawn into this story. But we're 4 seasons in, and somebody that we barely have seen at all is killed, and another person we barely know at all is the one freaking out, and it just sort of robs us of any sort of investment in what's going on, which is a huge problem with this show. But what I want to focus on more is that season 3 set up kind of the Man in Yellow, and a lot of sort of pointed, in my opinion, and a lot of people disagreed with me on this, but in my opinion, pointed towards like this evil fairy, like everyone's caught in this sort of wicked fae realm. From is this, I don't know, other dimension. It's a fairy kingdom. It's whatever. It's a prison for mortals, and they're getting messed with by an evil fairy, the Man in Yellow, maybe more than one, who is sending monsters and horrors at them because of some old bargain where they sacrifice children, where some other people, not our characters in this show, in this iteration of this story, but in the past, sacrificed their children for immortality. That's pretty much what happened. And for many, many reincarnations, Jade and Tabitha's characters have been coming back again and again and again to try to right this wrong. And we learn at the end of season 4 that, yeah, the boy in white and the man in yellow, disguised as this chick, Sophia, are like the two opposing forces in this strange, supernatural dimension, which is also like Lost, it's been a long time since I've seen Lost, so, but how there were the two characters at the end of that, and they were like opposing forces of good and evil, so we're getting some retread from Lost for sure. But a lot of great stuff was set up, and then like all the things I was excited about didn't even happen at all. And like, I am not one of these fans of this show that's like, I need more answers or I'm not going to be happy. Like, I don't need all the answers. I would be fine if all the answers, were doled out to us in the final 5th season. Like, we've gotten a lot of answers, and I feel like the show has kind of done a poor job at sort of like leading us closer to the answers, but I don't need the answers. I'm okay waiting as long as I feel like we are following some sort of mystery towards an organic and natural and sensible conclusion. And it's not doing a great job of that, but it's also not really fulfilling its promises that were made just from a narrative standpoint, like the story walking, the time traveling. At the end of season 3, Julie appears right before her father, Jim, is killed, and she looks totally different, and it's very clear in that moment that she has come back in time and is trying to stop him from being killed. So, of course, what I think is going to happen in season 4 is that we're going to get this whole big storyline where Julie is story walking, time traveling, and we're going to see her throughout moments of the past, in this show, but also the distant past. Maybe she, goes back to when Victor's a kid, and she goes back even further, and by the end of the season, we kind of have narrative momentum in this time traveling, story walking storyline. They do that a little bit. She goes back in time to Victor's time and sees the Man in Yellow like eating somebody's organs, like their liver or something, and he scares her and she leaves. And she also goes back to an episode in season 2, I believe, like season 2, episode 7, I think it was, but I'd have to check. It's when Boyd and some of the others are trying to escape the RV, and there's a bunch of the night monsters. And so we get 2 of those scenes in 10 whole episodes, a whole season, and that's it. And then Randall convinces her that it's too dangerous and she's just having seizures. And this really annoying thing that this show does is characters are constantly like, hey, that crazy thing that happened, that's crazy. You're crazy. That can't happen. That's crazy. Instead of being like, we are clearly in this insane, horrific, supernatural place. Like, none of this is unbelievable in this context. Like, if you were just walking down the street and you like told somebody, hey, I can walk through those pillars and I can go back in time, they might be like, dude, you're crazy. But if in the context of this show, everybody should pretty much be like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Let's pursue that more. So the fact that no one is pursuing this time travel element, that Julie hasn't even talked to anybody about it, it's just another really annoying thing about From. They do, in general, talk to each other more. Like overall, I feel like people are communicating more with one another than they have in the past. It's been one of my great annoyances with this show. But a lot of the time it's just this repetitive dialogue that just drives me crazy. Boyd, who I like him as a character, but he's pretty much all he does is shout at people now and act real stressed out and just goes, no, 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 stop, listen. It's just over and over. Just he's this very repetitive sort of always like about to have a heart attack character. And it's exhausting to watch him at this point. He doesn't, nobody really thinks through their plans. And we're going to get to the bottle tree bit in a second, which just absolutely blew my mind with how stupid it was. The other big thing that was sort of promised at the beginning of the season is that Ethan, he goes out to the RV and then he sees like a vision or a ghost or a version of his father, and Jim seems confused, like he's not really sure why he's there. So I don't think this was an evil spirit trying to fool Ethan. I think this really was Jim, like afterlife Jim, stuck in this evil fairy realm. And he tells him that he needs to find the Lake of Tears, which immediately made me think, that sounds familiar. Why is that so familiar? So I go back to the very first episode, and in the first and second episode, we get of the whole show in season 1. In the first episode, Julie is telling like a story with her little finger monster puppets about Norman getting killed, but don't worry, the fairies are coming from the Lake of Tears. So this moment, like this ties all the way back to the very beginning. And then in the second episode of the first season, there's a further conversation about Ethan having a dream about the Lake of Tears. And so this is clearly this really important thing. And they go off, Ethan goes off with Tabitha and some others, and to find the Lake of Tears. And they do come to a lake. It's the lake that's near where they like harvest some of their food and stuff. And they pull these human-sized dolls out of the lake. And then those turn into monsters, and there's this big scene where Tabitha eventually stabs one with one of the little totem pole things they find, and it kills it. And that's it. They dropped the Lake of Tears story. If that's the entire Lake of Tears story, that's insane to me. If it's not the entire Lake of Tears story, then why did they just drop it completely from the season? Like, why did we get no more investigation of the Lake of Tears? Why is there no pursuing of that or the story walking? It's like these big, interesting, forward momentum type stories are just they get their little moment and then they're just dropped, and it doesn't make sense in terms of like a season of TV. Like it's fine to have, I guess, like one thing Widow's Bay did really well is sort of have Monster of the Week episodes. So there'd be the haunted inn episode, and there's the creepy book party episode, and there's the boogeyman episode. So you can identify these episodes really well, and I think that's a really clever way of crafting a show, because it's so easy to remember these very distinctive episodes, and From just sort of, it all sort of just blurs together. And I'm not saying From needs like Monster of the Week, but it does need storylines that, like, if you're going to introduce them, they need to continue. They can't just drop off unresolved completely. It's not like they found the Lake of Tears and something was resolved. They just stopped talking about it completely. And that's so strange and frustrating and infuriating as a viewer. Which brings us kind of to the end of the season, where we have Victor's dad, Henry. He has been corrupted by Sophia, who's like the Man in Yellow's alternate version of himself. The innocent blonde girl who's been going around and like meddling with everything. Half the things she's done to meddle with have done pretty much nothing. The only one that has any effect is her twisting Henry's mind into thinking that he's actually in a coma in the real world, and the only way he can get out is to shoot Victor. We also got a lot of sort of like Boyd re-experiencing his own wife, like memories of his own wife. So I thought for sure that at some point Boyd and Henry's stories would come together, because surely the reason that his wife thought that she had to shoot everybody was because she had been somehow corrupted by the Man in Yellow, right? That's the natural assumption to make. But in the end, when it all comes down, Henry is going to shoot Victor, and Ethan walks in, and then you think he's going to shoot Ethan, but he doesn't shoot him, and Victor tackles him, and he's really mad, and it's just none of the sort of like what you'd expect from the sort of hints and foreshadowing come together in any of these stories. And it's just a very perplexing way to write a season of television, because it would have made so much more sense if Boyd had been the one who started to notice that something was up with Henry, and once he realized that there was similarities between what was going on with Henry and with his now dead wife, he could have figured out and put two and two together. And there was no sort of like puzzle pieces being put together that somebody was messing with everybody. And they didn't need to like discover Sophia, but they could have, because at one point Elgin literally finds a picture of Sophia from like 40 years ago, and instead of being smart and even like just having the tiniest amount of brains to think, oh, this is weird, I should go show somebody this because this is creepy, he goes and shows Sophia, who, being an evil fairy demon, kills him. I honestly, when he found that picture, I said out loud, because I was watching with my son, I said out loud, he better not just go show Sophia that. And he did. He just went and showed Sophia. It's unbelievable. It's okay. The characters are allowed to be stupid, but at a certain point, if you make enough characters stupid and do stupid things, then the show just feels stupid. And by the end of the show, it just felt really stupid because, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, this video's gone on long enough. They have a plan to get the bones of the children, the Ankui children, out of the tunnels where they're like buried under in that room that Jade saw with the tree branches, the tree roots above, and like this must be where they were sacrificed or something. So they come up with this plan that they're going to send Jade and Tabitha into the chamber down below in the tunnels. They're going to put up a talisman to keep the monsters out, but then they're going to yank the bottle tree up with a truck, which I'm not sure that they physically could do that. But once they're in there, then they're going to yank it up, and then they're going to put a ladder down and get them out. Victor is told by the boy in white, who's always very cryptic, don't do this. This ruins everything. This is a bad idea. When Victor tries to explain this, of course, nobody listens to him. They actually arrest him, which really pissed me off. And because nobody listens to Victor, even though he's been here the longest and by far knows the most about what's going on, nobody ever listens to him. So they do this plan, and I don't understand the plan. I don't understand why they can't, even if they're going to tear up this bottle tree, why can't they just tear it up first? Like, why can't they do it simultaneously? Why does it have to be that they do it when they're down there? Like, I guess I'm just not really understanding. Couldn't you just have a talisman at both entry points? Like, if you went in during the day, I don't know. It didn't seem like a very good plan. But all hell breaks loose when they do this. The sky turns dark so the monsters can come out. There's crazy lightning storms. They're like magical lightning storms. There's earthquakes. And we're kind of left at the end with like everything's way worse than it was before, but they have the bones. And, a couple characters like Elgin die. Fatima, I forgot to mention that she this whole time has been sort of transformed by giving birth to the Smiley monster and had like a psychic connection with him. And then she like turns into a monster in the end, but like a monster with agency. So she like fights the other monsters to hopefully let everyone else escape the tunnels. And there's so much more in all season. I'm just not going to go over all of it. But ultimately, I found this to be the weakest of the seasons. It felt rushed, and yet at the same time, it felt plodding and slow. And this is like this happens in shows sometimes where it's weird because you're like, well, it seems like they rushed through all the stuff that was important, but burdened us with so much like filler and bad dialogue and just every character going in circles. Nothing seems to move forward at the pace that it ought to move forward. So even though some things are rushed, you just sort of feel like they're rushed in place. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. There were some great episodes. Early on in the season, I thought there was some really good stuff. I mentioned the Lake of Tears bit with Jim. There was also a really fun mushroom eating scene where Jade goes on a little mushroom trip, which was super ironic because the same week Widow's Bay had its mushroom eating scene. And of course, it was a much better scene than the From scene. So if you haven't seen Widow's Bay, I'm going to make a video about that, but it's a great, absolutely fantastic show. My favorite new show of the year. So, but ultimately, like, I feel like we gotten to this point where they really sort of squandered the Man in Yellow. He became a much less frightening or interesting villain figure because they made him front and center as Sophia, who is a much less frightening and interesting just actress than the Man in Yellow's actor himself, who was so creepy in his yellow suit. So they showed us a lot more without making it really a satisfying answer to any of our questions. And not a lot really happened. We have a lot of stuff like that could happen, right? The town is going to turn on Jade and Tabitha apparently. But none of that actually takes place. Some people have been working for the Man in Yellow this whole time, we learned, but it was like a character whose name I can't even remember. That she's barely been featured in this show. Interesting if it had been a character that we actually cared about, like if Donna had been working for the Man in Yellow this whole time, and that would have been crazy. It feels like they played it safe, but also went too big with the final, like lightning storm and earthquake and stuff. It's like they don't really know. I mean, I know they've said a million times they know where they're going, but it's like maybe they know the end, but they just have the hardest time getting there. The getting there is just as important as knowing the end. A lot of times we talk about shows like this and we're like, well, I hope they have it all worked out. I hope they have the ending worked out so that we get answers. But just as important as getting those answers is having a good time along the way. In fact, in some ways, more important than having those answers. Often, the problem with mystery box shows, and I even need to talk about Severance in a separate video, because even in a show as quality as Severance, sometimes getting those answers actually makes the story a lot less enjoyable. And so just banking it all on getting the answers by the end of the season isn't enough for me. It needs to be a fun story along the way with characters who we root for, who we care about, who feel human, and we just get way too much of like hyperactive Angry Boyd, way too much of Tabitha being awful. And frankly, I've come to despise Tabitha as a character. And that shouldn't be the case by now. There's too many characters, there's too many extras, there's too much going on, and yet nothing really happening in From. And I'm still going to watch the final season, and this still isn't like Fear the Walking Dead bad, but like even by the end of season 3, when a lot of people were like, I'm kind of checked out of this, I was still pretty excited about it. And by the end of season 4, I feel a lot less enthusiastic about where this is going, and I have a lot less faith in the creators of this show. So I really hope that they take some criticism to heart and that they really work on those scripts for the 5th season and give us something like powerful and exciting and pay off on some of these big promises that you've made. Because as it stands, it's not looking good. So let me know what you thought of season 4. I know I left a ton out. You just can't cover 10 whole episodes in 23 minutes or whatever. So if there were some big parts missing that you'd like to talk about more, you have some theories, let me know. I'm happy to talk about this show because even though it drives me crazy, I do still care about it a lot. So thank you for watching. Peace.